The psychedelic revolution is here. If you want to integrate your visionary experiences into your purpose, get clear on your entrepreneurial path, and help people while you do what you love, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach, 3-time entrepreneur, and a lifelong student of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. You carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times. This podcast will help you to share your medicine so you can create transformation in the world. Listen in on conversations with psychedelic leaders, changemakers, and conscious entrepreneurs who are living proof that a better world is possible when you follow your heart and live in alignment with your soul. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Medicine for These Times. I'm so honored to have Jason Fellows with us here today. Hi, Jason. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Jason is the founder of Tribal Detox, a Kambo training program, and much more than just that. The reason why I know about you is that my friend and former client, Sarah Price, went through your training, had developed your advanced Kambo practitioner training, and she has served me this medicine. And it was, I've sat with this medicine with multiple people, and wow. Sarah just held it at a different level that I wasn't used to. And I always say, I don't know if I'll sit with anyone else other than her.
Yes,
so she said such great things about you. So I'm really excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. And Sarah, we love Sarah. She's our local in-house genius.
Yeah, I know, right? It's so funny being friends with her. I'm like, wow, I just learned so much from listening to you. Yeah, she's just like an encyclopedia of knowledge. Well, I would love to hear your story. And I'm excited to talk about Kambo. And by the way, we were talking off camera. I've always pronounced it Kambo. I know a lot of people pronounce it Kambo. I've heard both. Some is just the accent, whatever. But it is kind of still such a mysterious medicine on some level, I think, to a lot of us. And a lot of us who've done it are like, we don't really know what it's doing, but it's working. I mean, of course, we know a fair amount, but yeah, what brought you to this medicine or onto the medicine path, and then also to create Tribal Detox? I'm curious what your story is.
Yeah, sure. My journey into the medicines is a little different than a lot. I come from a background of military and oil field, but and I stopped working in the oil field, I guess about 7 or 8 years ago. But from my mid-20s to my mid-30s, I wasn't doing very well. I was starting to struggle. Psychologically, I was in a bad place. I was starting to have bouts of depression, anxiety, insomnia, intrusive thoughts, suicidal ideations, like you name it. And I felt like I was going through it. But I was stubborn, refused to talk to anybody for a long time until one day the suicidal ideations began to feel a little more comfortable than scary. And I thought at that point, we need to talk to somebody. So I did talk to a friend of the family who was a psychologist, explained to her everything that I was going through. We got into my past a little bit. She said, the good news is you're not going crazy. However, you do seem to be showing symptoms of complex PTSD. She said, here's the road to therapy. It's probably going to get a lot more difficult before it gets easier. Here's your medication options. And me, being the stubborn person I was like, well, I'm probably not going to do any of that. So I'll find something more holistic or I'll die trying. So from there, it's really when the journey began. I was on a mission to find something to help this. And a few arbitrary conversations and random encounters led me down to the Amazon jungle, where I found myself drinking ayahuasca with the Shipibo, being brand new to psychedelic medicine. Had no understanding of what I was getting.
Never had any?
No, I'd mushrooms a little bit, more in a recreational setting, but never had an understanding of healing through psychedelics. So I went down to the jungle, and ayahuasca was incredible. Right. And that's really where it began. Now, even though ayahuasca didn't necessarily take away the symptoms I was having, it helped me understand why I was having them. That's the first stage of healing. It's understanding. You got to know what it is you even need to heal. So I went back and forth to the jungle for about a year or so, working with ayahuasca until ayahuasca just got a little too difficult for me, right? I would touch on those love and light realms every once in a while, but I spent a lot of time in the shadow, a lot of time in the darkness. And it would get to where I would have so much anxiety going into the ceremony that I wasn't able to surrender to the experience. And it just become a grueling 6 to 8 hour ceremony. But I knew there was something real to these Amazonian medicines. So the journey continued. A few other random encounters and arbitrary conversations led me to a different part of the jungle to where I found Kambo. And, I'd found this property that these hippies own a couple 100 kilometers outside of Iquitos, pretty much where the road comes to an end, and it's a couple hour hike back into the jungle to where these members of the Matses tribe would come through and serve Kambo. So that's where I ended up. And, some guy named Robinson was his Christian name given to him from the Catholic missionaries, had the jaguar tattoos on his face. This Matses gentleman was the one that was going to serve me Kambo that morning. And it was a very unusual experience, unlike anything I have ever experienced. He took a little stick, made these little superficial burns in my arm, removed the skin, and then put these gelatinous dots that he formed from the secretion of a frog onto these open wounds. And when that happened, I won't get into the whole Kambo ceremony, but it hit me very, very hard. My body locked up into a state of rigor, which is kind of an abnormal reaction for a lot of people. And I went down on my side and I began to convulse, all while conscious. And,
can I ask, how many dots did he put on that first time?
It was because the Matses work a lot different. I think it was only 2 or 3 dots, but very fresh Kambo, almost right off the frog. So super, super potent. I went down and started to convulse, conscious through the whole thing. And they kind of looked at me perplexed, shrugged their shoulders, and then they walked off and had breakfast. And I thought, well, Chase, we did it this time. We found that adventure we might not come back from. But the whole process, obviously I did come back, and I was in that state for about 20 minutes before it started to subside. And there wasn't much to report on that day. I didn't notice much following the session, except that I just started to feel really good. My mood was good. My body felt good. I just felt good. But when I woke up that next morning, I'd slept 6 hours that night, which a lot of people would think that's much to write home about. But I'd not slept 6 hours in a decade. And then when I woke up, I could just tell I was back. Jason was back. And it's hard to explain that feeling. Sometimes we don't know how far gone we are until we come back. But it was just the sense of, okay, there's something to this. And then from there is when I pretty much committed my life. I learned how to self-administer while I was there. And, and that's all I did for a year. I would just post up next to my toilet, serve myself Kambo, go through the experience. This was about almost 10 years ago when Kambo wasn't really known about. And after the course of a year, I just couldn't believe what it had done for me. And it's not like I ever had this innate desire to be a Kambo practitioner when I grew up. But after what it had done for me, the thought that if it could do for other people what it did for me, it felt more like an obligation. People need to know about this. And that's when I decided to commit my life to it, to understanding this medicine and learning how to apply it safely so that others can benefit from it.
Wow. Oh, I love these stories. And I know, I first did it in 2016 and, I'd heard about it. It was, kind of making the rounds in the medicine community. And there was a guy who I know had lots of trauma and had sat with him in ceremonies multiple times and just was kind of just a really intense energy. And he started really getting into Kambo and he became a different person. And much better, like grounded and solid. And like, it just kind of felt like it was his true self came out versus this mask of trauma running him in the way he was for so long. And, I remember that was the first time where I'm like, oh, maybe I should look into this. There is something I'm noticing that's different about you. And I had originally thought it was only for physical healing, and then witnessing his shift and his change and how much his life was changing as well, and relationships. I was like, okay, let me look into it. And then my first experience, I had come back from my first dieta in the jungle, and got sick on the last day and a half, 2 days in Peru, and was really food poisoning sick, on the plane. And when I got back, and then I took Cipro, which, back then I didn't know that Cipro was probably the worst thing I could take, but, it was desperation. And my life and it wasn't just me, it was a few of us that had gone through this. All of us were having a really hard time integrating that dieta. It was just like my life blew up into flames and everything felt awful, and I felt depressed. And I was like, wow, I went and did this big, powerful journey in the jungle, and something was off. And that's when someone was like, go do some Kambo, do the 3 rounds in the moon cycle. And it was the exact experience that you described. It was not easy, but and the person who administered it, someone I'm still in touch with, said we probably crossed our dieta, energetically, for various reasons. But when I did it, it was like reborn and better,
Mhm.
but it's definitely not the easiest medicine. I'm curious, how does Kambo even work? There's a physical aspect. I think all of us know, we've heard a little bit about the peptides and the secretion and the bile that you throw up, but I don't think any of us truly understand how it works. But then also, on a spiritual and energetic level as well. How do you explain Kambo?
Sure. So, it's Kambo generally is known as a detox or a cleanse, right? Because it's typically a purgative medicine. And there's a big misconception around Kambo that Kambo comes into the bloodstream, squeezes all the toxins from the organs, throws them on a magic shuttle bus to the stomach to where they're purged out of the body forever, right? And that sounds fun in a sense, right? To be able to just purge illness or purge sickness and then be better. But it's not how biology works, and it's not how Kambo works. And it's so much more beautiful and so much more complex than just a cleanse. But to understand Kambo, you have to really understand peptides, because Kambo is just this very unique, complex cocktail of bioactive and neuropeptides. And a peptide essentially is a signaling molecule, a little chemical messenger that instructs the cells of the body how to behave properly, or how to perform properly, or how to function properly. We actually create over 7,000 peptides endogenously in our own body. They're the little mechanics that keep everything in balance. That's what it's all about, is bringing the body back into homeostasis. Now, the reason this is important is because as we go through life, right, as we suffer physical and psychological trauma, as we suffer illness and disease, as we grow up, we're introduced to pharmaceutical medications and vaccines at a very young age. And even age itself can kind of be considered a disease, because it's just brain-body function marked by the loss of cellular efficiency. So all these things have an impact on the body, which in turn has an impact on the peptides that we create in our body. And over time, it can cause the peptides to become insufficient or ineffective. They can start sending confused signals. And we really start to notice this as we get into our 30s and 40s. Those little aches and pains start to come up out of nowhere. The digestive system seems a little bit more sluggish. We're getting sick more often. The immune system isn't quite firing as it should. We might start noticing psychological things like depression and anxiety that just seem to pop up out of nowhere. Even weight gain, right? When our diet hasn't really changed and we can't seem to shed those pounds, unbeknownst to a lot of people, this is due to peptide insufficiency. Now, the peptides in Kambo are very similar to the peptide structure that our own body creates. So when Kambo enters into the bloodstream, the body knows what to do with it, right? So, and it's not like there's a single magic ingredient in Kambo that heals the body, because the peptides basically move the body back into balance. Kambo teaches the body how to heal itself. This is true healing, right? A lot of times people, following a Kambo session, they'll just be like, man, I just feel superhuman following that session. I'll say, no, you don't. You feel human. This is how we're supposed to feel. Most of our bodies and psyches have been in a state of chaos for so long, we've forgotten what feeling human feels like. We're supposed to feel this good. And that's kind of where the spiritual element comes in. A lot of times it's easy. Most of us are running on a program, right? We're running on a program given to us by social media, given to us by our parents, our preachers, our teachers, right? A lot of times we don't know what's ours or what's been given to us, right? We run through all these, just the life destroying our physical body through medications, through bad foods, through just all of it, right? And Kambo is a great rebalancer. So, when we feel good, a lot of times we don't even realize we feel bad because we've gotten so used to feeling bad. So when we feel good, we're not distracted by the program anymore, which opens up the spirit to be, right, more attuned to what spirit has for us.
Love it. What a great explanation. And yeah, when I first did it after that cross dieta, my friend who was like the suggester of go see so and so for this, he said it blows all your chakras back into place. And I'm like, you know what? That is a very good way of putting it. It's interesting. I've done it where people are like, wow, you look really good. You're radiating. I've done it where I've had dreams at night, where I used to be a really big marathon runner, and where I would just be running in these dreams. It was like just so much energy in my body. And it's fascinating even doing a really low dose. Once I went through a really kind of not so skillful breakup, and it was like this big combo session that it was probably the most purgative session I've ever had. And it was really deep, but wow, on a spiritual level, it was just like being reborn again. But let's talk about, there's also this kind of darker side of Kambo. I mean, the whole kind of medicine world has gotten very weird over the last 5 years. And as we know, and you and I talked about this a little, I'm very selective about who I even bring on here, especially trainings and schools. And, I've heard of people, you can do this in hour training or a weekend training. And I always say who's to say what training is good or bad. It could be 5-year training and maybe it's not even good. But there's definitely there's been a growing popularity. It feels like everybody's a practitioner these days. And I shouldn't say everybody, but I've met a fair amount of people over the years who are like, oh, I serve Kambo. And I'm like, oh, well, where did you learn how to do that? Or where'd you even get this medicine from? And what is your belief and your background? And I've also now, I only have worked with a few different people over the years, but there's now different approaches, and, there's different theories about how much water you drink. And by the way, there's been deaths out there. I mean, and, death is death. I don't think we should run from death. It's part of life. But yeah, let's talk about your approach and how it's been feeling, especially in the last few years of the Wild West of Kambo practitioners out there. Yeah, what makes you guys different? Yeah.
The Wild, Wild West is a good way to put it. You can't hardly throw a rock without hitting a Kambo practitioner these days. They're everywhere. But there's various levels of skill, knowledge, and training in that. Now, the reason we even came up with Tribal Detox as a training platform, and initially we had no intention to train. We were just happy serving. But when you kind of bring it back a little bit, after that year of just working with myself, I really wanted to learn how to serve other people. And I knew this medicine was so powerful that I didn't feel comfortable with that. There's more I needed to know. And there wasn't a lot available at that time. There was one international outfit that was training people. So I went to their training program in Sri Lanka. And it was centered mostly, I had a lot of fun there, met a lot of great people, but it was centered mostly around altar building, singing, ikaros, ceremony, things like that. Coming from a background of military and oil field, that was all brand new to me. I had no understanding of that. And when I was in the jungle, there was no ceremony or anything like that around the Kambo session. And it was almost like they were trying to make Kambo into ayahuasca, right? But you don't know what you don't know. So I went through the program and I started serving Kambo under the umbrella of this organization. And I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning, a lot of mistakes. I often tell our students that this class is built on the backs of all the mistakes that I made early on to try to prevent you from making the same ones. But after a year or two of working with this organization, as Kambo is becoming more popular around the globe, we noticed some people were starting to get hurt. And some people had even lost their life in the Kambo session. Come to find out later, not much to do with the Kambo, but everything the way that the Kambo was served, right? And me and a couple others start asking the hard questions. Why is this happening? Is it random or can it be prevented? Because if I could just randomly hurt my whole purpose in this is to help people. And if there is ever a chance I could hurt somebody, I wouldn't do it. Full stop. And what we were getting back was a lot of deflection, even some victim blaming, and it bothered me a lot. So at that point, I was like, I'm not going to pursue this if there's a potentiality of people getting hurt. So I put the Kambo sticks down and I left the organization. But there was something that it's like a little animal gnawing at my brain saying, you can figure this out, right? Because I knew how powerful Kambo was and I knew the potential it had to help so many people. So I put my head back into the books. Now, there wasn't a lot available at that time, but what was available was a single clinical paper written by a pharmacist named Rosa Sanchez, which was the complete chemical analysis of all the peptides found in Kambo. And that was my beginning, right? So I started to go down each individual peptide into rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. I wanted to know what a peptide was, how it functioned, how it engaged with biology of our own body. Kambo is known as a purgative. And the way it was practiced a lot back then is the practitioner would force you to purge, right? You had to get this out of your body. So that's where the illness was. So I started looking into detox and I started going into rabbit holes on detox and what is a detox and how is a detox as it relates to Kambo? How does purging relate to Kambo? Is it even necessary to purge? And what I began to understand is that up until that point, I had not known Kambo at all, right? It wasn't a detox. It wasn't a cleanse. It was a rebalancer. It was an enhancement, right? And learning these things and the understanding of these things shifted the whole way that I did my practice. And, when I made those little subtle but kind of profound shifts, my clientele went from about 10 to 15 people per month to about 60 to 70 people per month. We were able to administer Kambo in a way that was manageable, not overwhelming, and that people were still benefiting from massively. And then it got to where it was too many people for me, so I recruited my girlfriend, now wife, to help me. And then it got to be too many people for the both of us. And that's when we started the school. We was like, we need more of us, right? Now, our whole approach to Kambo is safety, right? And we say we keep Kambo safe and legal because right now, even though it's unregulated, it's not illegal. It's not scheduled, right? And the way we keep it safe and legal is that we keep people safe and protected. It's how we keep Kambo safe and protected. So the whole thing, our whole approach is towards safety. Now, where we differ for a lot of people is we don't force a purge and we do minimum water intake. Where a lot of the incidents of people that get in trouble with Kambo is due to something called hyponatremia, right? And basically what that means, the old way, or unfortunately the way a lot of people are still working with Kambo, is they'll have, their client drink a minimum of 2 liters of water, sometimes much more, and
I was
follow.
the first time I did it, he had us drink
Mhm.
it was like a gallon and a half or even two. I don't know. I remember
Yeah.
I had to bring gallons of water with me. Oh my God.
And this is where it starts to get dangerous, right? Because you drink an abnormal amount of water. And, you know, 2 very common things in Kambo is purging and diarrhea, which are very known to remove electrolytes from the body very quickly, right? So when you consume a large amounts of water, 2, 3, 4 liters plus, and then you administer Kambo, you start purging, you start having diarrhea, you're flushing these electrolytes out of the body, and the electrolyte is what maintains the osmotic pressure between the cell body and the fluid in the body. And if you don't have enough sodium in the body, right, then what will happen is the cells will start pulling water into the cells, particularly the brain cells, right? And those brain cells will absorb with water, begin to swell against the internal structures of the skull, compressing the brainstem, which will send someone into what's called the hyponatremic state. You're basically squeezing the brain. The person will then fall into a seizure. After that, then a coma, and if not gotten to a hospital quick enough, death. And this is what probably the majority of deaths in Kambo are from. And it's sad because it's 100% completely avoidable. Completely avoidable. Nobody should ever suffer a hyponatremic state in Kambo. And this has to do with consuming more water than's necessary and forcing the client to purge, right? And I'm not sure, some people still do this. I'm not sure why they still do this, but we are slowly changing the script on that. But the thing is, once you understand that Kambo is not actually a cleanse, it's not actually a detox, then there's no need to force the client to purge. There's nothing to detox out of the body. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have an incredible psychological or even spiritual release on that purge. I've had them, and they are beautiful. And then you feel incredible afterwards. Actually, purging is what resets the polyvagal. If your nervous system is stuck in fight or flight, purging will reset that, vagal nerve. And that's why we feel so good and calm and relaxed after Kambo, right? But the key is to let it happen naturally, not to force it, right? Not to drink copious amounts of water to try to stimulate that purge. It's unnecessary, completely unnecessary. We have people drink a little bit of water, usually about half a liter, just to have something on the stomach should they need to purge, so it's not so grueling, but it's never forced. I tell my clients, if you want to sit here and meditate through it, you can do that. If you want to lay here and let it wash over you, you can do that. If you want to sit here and talk to me about anything but Kambo to distract yourself as you go through this 20-minute ordeal, you can do that. There's no dignity in Kambo. And the thing is, we just got to get through it. And purge or not, Kambo will do its job. And our approach to the medicines is all about relationship building. Doesn't mean if it's Kambo, bufo, mushrooms, name the medicine, right? It's all about building the relationship. A lot of times people want to come in, they want to do 6 or 7 dots, they want to drink 2 cups of ayahuasca or blast off with bufo. They're trying to get that one and done session, right? They're trying to force the healing. But the dose only matters when you're trying to force it. Whether it's when you build the relationship, right? When you start at those lower manageable doses and you train the ego to feel safe and comfortable with the energy that's coming into the body. And from there, you just slowly build up until you find your tolerance level. And then Kambo can actually be a blissful experience, contrary to what most would believe.
what does it take to get there? No, I'm kidding. It is, it is beautiful. It is, I think if you like build a relationship, are in a safe container, trust it, and I agree, by the way, I actually agree very much with the whole, the ceremonial aspect, what you were saying down in the jungle. I mean, I've been down to the jungle enough to know, like, a lot of what people envision happening down there is not what they think, it's
Yeah.
like, they're kind of, I always say it's like my shaman kind of just, it's like his job, it's a job. And
That's exactly it.
it's like there's a little bit of there's the things, but it's not this huge production. And I do always set an intention with it. It's like, why am I even working with this gift? And it's just so magical to think that it's come from this tree frog, like this secretion, right? That somehow has been discovered to help us with our healing. And it's just amazing when you have that awareness and build that kind of relationship. But yeah, the whole like big peak experience, one undone, I call it, I've been referring to this for many years, the Amazon Prime effect. Especially here in America, there's so many people that are reading about these medicines in the mainstream media, and they think, oh, I heard that XYZ can heal my depression. And then they just think it's going to be this one session. And maybe they'll get some kind of miracle healing. I mean, we've all had those kind of experiences, but it's so much deeper than that. Like you said, it's this relationship that you build. I say if these medicines made us Jesus, we'd all be Jesus by now and we wouldn't need anything. It's a never ending process, right? But thank you for sharing about the deaths and the dangers. Cause it's, I know over the years I've heard about, like a practitioner in Australia who died self-administering. And then you hear the rumors, and then it's like, well, she gave it to herself and it was on her heart and it was too much. And, and then you hear about, I mean, even me, I've always been hypersensitive. So I tend to take lower amounts just in general of pretty much everything there is, including flower essences. But there was a guy I know serving to a lot of people I knew who was giving like 10 dots at a time on the first session. And it was like, their arms are covered after a few sessions. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I mean, it's to each their own. Like, I'm not one to say what's right or wrong. But, what are you seeing out there? Is there that kind of like people want to go in and just give me all of the dots? Or like, why are people, like, I've heard rumors about administering on the heart, and, someone administers a bunch on their heart. I mean, it's like, you hear these stories, and I'm wondering, like, what's going on? Is it just lack of education, or people pushing the limits, or maybe they know, like, hey, this works for me, but maybe it wouldn't work for everybody else?
I think it's all of that, right? I think it's all of that. And the thing is once things hit Instagram, social media, and YouTube, it becomes very sensationalized, right? And people can speak about these things in a way that gets hits or gets likes, rather than that's too grounded or based in reality. Take and a lot of it's just lack of education, lack of understanding of the medicine that they're working with. As far as like burning somebody and mixing Kambo, I can teach that to anybody in about an hour. That's not complicated. The hard part comes to understanding what the medicine is, understanding who's a candidate and who's not a candidate based on the chemical makeup of that medicine, based on, the physiology of that person, any known illnesses, any medications, right? And point placement does matter. So in terms of the girl in Australia, what had happened with her is she just went through a training program, right? And she came back and she got one of her friends to sit with her who was a Kambo practitioner. She just didn't go through the training program. I don't know if she learned from somebody else or just learned on her own. But she put a lot of dots across her chest, right? Now, the closer you get to the heart, the more immediate those effects are going to be. Now, there's two peptides in Kambo called the corellins and the savagines. And what they do when they hit the bloodstream is they cause an immediate drop in blood pressure. So you know how within about 90 seconds of a Kambo ceremony, your heart rate starts speeding up, you start getting an increased heart rate? That's because of those two peptides. Blood pressure's dropped, heart rate starts beating faster to bring that blood pressure back up to a manageable level. Now, if there's too much of a concentration of those peptides, in that location, meaning they did way too many dots for what her blood pressure could handle. The blood pressure dropped so low that the heart couldn't get it back up, which caused the young lady to unfortunately go into cardiac arrest. And, I hate to speculate whether she could have been saved or not with additional safety training, but with additional knowledge of knowing the potential risk, she would have never done it. And this is the problem is, when it comes to our school, for example, I tell the students I cannot teach you spirituality. We believe spirituality is subjected to the individual. What spirituality means to you might mean something very different to me. And if there's a message in spirituality that Kambo wants you to have, Kambo will deliver that message way more effectively than I will. The whole purpose of me, you being here, is to help you understand what Kambo is doing in the body and what to do should something occur, right? The problem we get into out there is everybody wants to lean into the psycho-spiritual effects of Kambo while negating the physical consequences, right? Yes, there is a psycho-spiritual element to Kambo, but if you focus completely on that while negating the physical body and the consequences that could happen from negating the physical body and the understanding of the chemical makeup of Kambo, this is when we start running into trouble, right? Now, yeah, people want to post pictures of them purging whatever color of purge into a bucket. Like, look, this is 13 years of, ancestral trauma and everything else. But when we say that, people will be like, oh, they'll see it. I want to purge ancestral trauma, or I want to achieve whatever that is that I'm seeing, not understanding that this is not a one-size-fits-all medicine. Kambo is very specific to the individual. Everybody has their own tolerance to this medicine. In fact, when we serve Kambo, we always start, I might burn 3 or 4 gates if you sit with me, but you're only getting 1 dot initially that I'm going to monitor for 5 minutes to get a very good understanding of your tolerance. Just because I burned 4 doesn't mean you have a tolerance for 4. That test point may tell me you only have a tolerance for 2, right? So it's understanding Kambo, all elements of it, the physical, the psychological, the spiritual. It's understanding, at least a baseline understanding of biology in the human body, and then understanding how the Kambo engages with the biology of the human body so that we don't ever overwhelm or put our client, in a compromised state.
Oh my God. This is so much knowledge. And I'm like, when did I first do this? 10 years ago, 9 years ago? Very interesting. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of speculation, and, it's always like the media sensationalizes, like, you hear of someone dying and then you hear they were a practitioner and you're like, what did they do? What went wrong? And I think that's, it's interesting now that you're saying all this. I think that's why I really like sitting with Sarah, because it was, it's almost feels like it's a medical approach where it's like, okay, even the fact that she used a timer, I was like, wait, I don't think anyone has ever timed this. Maybe they did, but I don't think they timed it in a very detailed way where it was like, okay, we need to approach this from a scientific standpoint first. And of course, there's still a spiritual aspect to it always. Like everything is spiritual, right? We can't disconnect it. But I think you're right. It's like people, especially in this world, and hopefully there's more and more education, people like you talking about this. But I think for a while, especially a few years ago, it was just so many people were after these huge peak experiences. And like you said, they would hear stories or, oh, I found God, or I, found out who I truly was, or cleansed myself of all this trauma in one session. And everybody's chasing that. And we've seen this with, a lot of these other medicines as well. And then, by the way, as someone who's been working in this area for a while, I can't tell you the number of people that have also been reporting, just major destabilization, re-traumatizing themselves, nervous system overwhelm, adrenal fatigue, people just like going to the next peak experience, the next. And, I think I'm hoping it's kind of calmed down a little. But a few years ago, it was pretty crazy what I was seeing out there. And, even once in a while, it's like someone will come across saying, I had a mushroom session with a therapist, and they couldn't even integrate something as simple as, as simple as that. And it's just, you kind of wonder what's going on. It's like you said, there's a certain level of like anybody could figure out how to serve it, right? But then it's so much more than that.
It's almost, sometimes people bag on us saying, oh, Jace, he leans too much into the science. Your Tribal Detox, they're too science-based when Kambo's a spiritual medicine. But my rebuttal to that is science is the literal blueprint given to us by spirit so that we can understand these medicines and know how to use them most effectively. And the thing is it becomes, there's two types of people that come to this work. There's the type that's looking for the cool guy factor, right? Beats a 9 to 5, seems to get a little bit of accolades, a little bit of attention with this work, right? It's kind of unusual. But the thing about it, as soon as things get tough, those people fold or they go out and hurt somebody because it's all about image rather than healing. And then you have the people that put it all on the line. Right? They believe in something bigger than themselves, and it's not competitive. They're just there to serve those who are looking for them, and those who need them will find them, right? And the problem is when it becomes competitive, at least in the plant medicine world, people start trying to out-spiritual one another, which usually means trying to out-weird one another or trying to add more fireworks, more performance, more intensity to, whatever medicine that they're serving. But these things, it doesn't have to be like that, right? Probably the most effective healing is going to be some of the most boring healing, all right? Start off small, build the relationship, and you slowly bring yourself back. You don't come from, living on the streets to living in a mansion over one. There's too much of a gap, right? You didn't get to be in the state that you were overnight, right? It's been years and years and decades of trauma and whatever else that got you here. And you can't expect that you're going to heal it in 24 hours or one session. It's a process. It's the journey, and that journey is lifelong. And I say we're never really healed. We're always healing, right? Because life is always happening.
Such a great perspective. And yeah, you named it. There is a lot of that. It's like, I don't know whether people are competing with one another or within themselves or just pushing the edge of like, I want more. It's interesting. It's like so much ego in there. But that's why I make jokes about like, well, we'd all be Jesus if it just took one big session,
Exactly.
But it's like life, we're here to be integrated human beings. And like you said, I love that. Sometimes it's the most boring way, right? Like sit and meditate and drink some really clean water. But I would love to hear about, so you do some work with veterans, yes? Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're up to with them and how has this helped them and, what's the feedback from that community?
Yeah, so there's an organization called the Grunt Style Foundation, and they're a super interesting organization. One of the founders actually came through my program a year ago, and he's one of our practitioners. What the Grunt Style does is they spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C., talking to politicians, talking to lawmakers, senators, congressmen, things like that, because their whole purpose is to provide something better when veterans get out of the service. So for those that haven't served in the military, kind of the VA's approach to everything is just to hand you a bucket of pills, send you on your way and say good luck. no informed consent, what they're giving people, right? No understanding from the veteran of what they're actually taking home. And like we've all heard of the 22 a day, right? That's where a lot of that comes from. So I'll give you a pretty horrifying statistic. In Vietnam, we lost right around 58,000 soldiers, right? In the GWAT era, the global war on terrorism with Afghanistan and Iraq, I think we lost close to a combined of 7,000 to 8,000 soldiers. So between those two wars combined, about 70,000 people lost in war. Since 9/11, we have lost over 100,000 veterans to suicide, more than both those wars combined, right? This is a problem. Like this state is right. They're going out there fighting for our country and they're coming back and we're just giving them very dangerous psychological medication because we don't know what else to do and say, good luck. And this is why we still keep losing so many people. So what Grunt Style does is they offer a different approach, right? They work very heavily with groups in ayahuasca, with the Lakota community, right? Peyote and some of these other medicines, things like what I do. But it's not just psychedelic. They bring in all these different alternative modalities, equine therapy, Japanese incense, Qigong, like all these different modalities. And what they do is they go into DC and say, we have something better than what we're doing. And they've actually made a lot of headway with it. And basically what has come back says, okay, we're listening, but if we're going to take the pills out as the first mode of, what we're giving veterans, we need something to replace that with, which is where people like me come in, right? Even people like you educating so many people about these things. And they actually got the first, do you know what the VFW is? Veterans of Foreign Wars. It kind of used to be a hangout for just old veterans to go and drink and talk to each other and things like that. They actually got the first cannabis-based VFW that's going to open up in Texas, of all places, next spring. So this is the type of work that they're doing, right? So what they have like this integration event that they hold every year in September, and they're about to start doing it in different places around the U.S., but they'll bring in people like me to come and speak to these vets, showing them that there are other ways, right? You're not stuck where you're at. This hole is not, something you have to die in. There is a way out of this. And so we've been working with the Grunt Style, talking to a lot of those guys, introducing a lot of those men and women, introducing them to different modalities that is really just bringing people back. You know what I mean? Like we just had a Navy SEAL come through this training program back in January. We had this Marine Special Forces coming in a week to the training in a week. So the veterans, especially the combat-based veterans, are coming in, they're finding the healing that they need, and then they're introducing it to their community and putting a dent in this 22 a day. And really slowing that down.
Wow. Ooh, and these statistics, I'm like, do we talk about this? Probably not, brush it under the rug with other distractions in the media, I'm sure. I'm curious, is the VA, because, in an ideal world, it would save everybody, it would save taxpayers money, it would bring more healing, it would be faster results and less loss. But then, of course, we all know there's a system in place that, provides lots of money to whoever it is, the pharmaceutical companies or the VA in general. Are they becoming more and more open to this, and are they supportive of alternative healing? Because, of course, there's probably a company or many that make a lot of money off of everybody coming back from combat.
Yeah, there's definitely an incentive by the pharmaceutical companies to keep the old system in place, but they are making headway. They have gotten resolutions passed into offering different options instead of just accepting the pills. They haven't kicked the pills out completely. And I don't want to just, completely back on pharmaceutical medication. There are times where it can save your life, right? It's just not meant to be on long term, and it's meant to be given with informed consent, which is not being done. So a lot of laws are changing around that, and they are pushing these alternative modalities as an option for these soldiers rather than just the way the old system was.
So good. So good to hear. Yeah. This is where I get a lot of hope for the world. I've heard about grunt style through Sarah, and I had never heard of them. And it's interesting because I've heard of some of these, the Heroic Hearts Foundation, and some other groups doing, bringing people down to the jungle, and it's really fascinating to see. And I think the more this is being served and brought to communities, it's like, okay, if it could just start spreading through word of mouth, at least. I'm curious, are there people that support, financially to make everything? I mean, thankfully, Kambo has always been more affordable than, let's say, going down to the jungle and drinking ayahuasca, or, going on some retreat in Jamaica or wherever people are serving medicines. But, are there ways to set up, make it a lot more accessible for veterans? Is anyone supporting that?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of fundraisers, a lot of foundations that, like, there's I think it's in Costa Rica, a place called Vets, where they send a lot of these combat MOSs or combat soldiers down to, but they heavily work with ibogaine and 5-MeO or Bufo, right? Where they've been showing a lot of success in helping guys overcome this PTSD. And I know there's a lot of foundations that support that, fund that. But to the extent of it, I don't know how much.
Yeah. But that's so good to hear that there's, because I've heard like rumblings of this. I just haven't, had a deep dive into what's really going on the front lines. And then one other question. Yeah.
I just said it really is becoming more common,
Great.
The acceptance of it.
So good to hear. So good to hear. I also had one more question about sourcing. Because again, these days, hopefully it's dying down, but wow, the last few years, it's like you hear of people selling combo sticks on, Facebook or Instagram or, like random websites. And this is where someone like me, I've always been very particular about where my medicines come from and who serves me. And, everything I ever work with, I know exactly where it's sourced from. I've just always had that interest, but there's this trying to find this balance between people who just need healing, especially, I've been intertwined into medicine communities for a long time, but if you're out living somewhere where you just don't even know a community, and then someone's like, hey, I have Kambo, and they're like, I'm desperate, I'll try it. Like, how do you feel about sourcing? And have you heard any kind of horror stories of like bunk combo or combo being mixed with things, or, people, I mean, I'm sure there's people selling like, just swindling people, because that I've heard happening with everything out there. But, what do you say about sourcing? And then of course, then there's the whole, controversy over the frog itself, which, what's his name? 4-Hour Work Week. Yeah, I'm talking about. Like, why am I
Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss wrote that one piece back in like the middle of the pandemic that went totally viral about like all these plants and animals.
Yeah, I think about 300 people sent me the link to that article when it came out.
I know. I remember. I was like, oh gosh, damn.
What I tell people is, first of all, even though you may feel desperate, you never want to join a ceremony out of desperation. Whatever medicine you're considering, make sure you do your due diligence and research, not just what your friend told you about it. Okay. And there's enough information out there now online, that you can do some pretty good research. Now, when it comes to sourcing, this is where it's very important to know your practitioner and know where their medicine comes from, or at least they should know where their medicine comes from. You don't just want to buy a random Kambo stick off eBay or something like that if you don't know where it came from. Now, the thing about it is, as anything becomes marketable, there's going to be charlatans that exploit that market, and that's the same with Kambo as well. And there have been sticks. One thing that they'll do in the jungle is people that are just trying to make a quick buck off of Kambo is they'll take yucca and they'll squeeze the juice from yucca onto the stick, and then they'll mix the Kambo in with that. But it gives the appearance that there's a lot more Kambo on that stick than what there actually is. And then it dilutes the Kambo, so it takes more Kambo to get the same benefit. Unfortunately, I've heard that they've also used egg white to cut Kambo, right? Because it dries very similar, so it looks very, like the same. And yeah, I've never heard of anybody getting seriously ill that they had to be hospitalized from a dirty stick, but it will, obviously trigger an allergic reaction or an autoimmune reaction or an immune reaction rather. And you just I understand people get desperate, and what I say a lot of times is 911. Our Kambo is a 911 prayer to so many people when nothing else has worked, when their doctors haven't been able to give them what they're looking for, when everything else has failed. They'll find that crazy frog person that someone told them about and try this thing out with Kambo. But do your research. Find out who they are, how they've been trained, do they have any safety training? And the thing is, Kambo is very, very, very safe when facilitated by a knowledgeable and trained practitioner, just like any modality, just like even a personal trainer. You don't want to go to a personal trainer that just got fit in his garage and decided to start training people, right? This is where you open yourself up to being injured. And it's the same with Kambo. So yes, there are people that will, dilute these sticks with other substances. And there's people out there that are interested more in your wallet than they are your healing. And, most people that have been doing it a while, they're going to have a reputation. Just inquire, do your research, know what you're getting into, know who you're working with. Right. I would love to say that everybody that comes to facilitate plant and amphibian medicines are, just good and down to earth and ethical people. But that's not the case. People are people. Humans are humans. And you're going to get good practitioners. You're going to get bad practitioners. You're going to get ethical practitioners. You're going to get those that are exploiting the practice and you just for, some type of personal benefit.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning due diligence. I mean, I have the things I've seen over the years of just, again, that desperate feeling of like, I don't know where else to go. And then something just lands in your lap. But yeah, it's like,
I get it.
Yeah. Trust in the timing and do your research. And then, yeah, I mean, is it true? These rumors have been surfacing for ever since day one, since it's been around. It's like, what is the reality of these frogs? I mean, how bad is this for them? Are we killing them? Is this terrible? Are we, I always, I mean, it's the same question with any kind of medicine, by the way. How much is it like here for us as at this point in history because it's so needed versus how much is this us, just pillaging and taking and not being in right relationship and reciprocity with the natural world? I don't know. It's like a constant question of like, do I need this? Is this, especially by the way, people doing it for, I don't know, recreational. And again, there's the argument of like, it's okay. Who are we to say if you should do, I don't know, recreational mushrooms or ayahuasca or Kambo? But yeah, what are your views on that and this the whole approach?
Yeah. Tim Ferriss lost me as a fan when he put that article out, But the thing about it is a lot of times people will post a picture of the process and then they'll create a story around it or push a certain narrative of what they want the reader or the audience to get out of this. And a lot of times it's negative, right? And I get it, but you can't get an understanding of the process just from looking at a picture. Okay. Now, the way the Kambo is harvested from the frog is basically 4 sticks are driven into the ground, right? And then we'll send a 12-year-old boy up the tree because they're the best tree climbers, right? The young children. They'll take the frog, put it on their shoulder. They won't restrain it in any way, and then they'll just climb down. And that frog will sit there until we're ready for it. And then what will happen is we'll take these strings and we'll very gently, the thing that's important to remember is the indigenous, especially the Kokama, the tribe that we work with, they see themselves as the protector of the jungle and the animals in it. But it doesn't mean they're all vegan, right? It's the balance of the jungle, right? They have a different relationship to the jungle than most of us that live in the city or not so jungly place have, right? But so they consider these frogs as sacred. They would never harm it, never harm it. They'll take these strings, they'll tie it around the ankles of the frogs, and very slowly they'll just stretch the frog out, right? And they'll tie it to these 4 sticks to where it's kind of like in this X formation. Now, the reason they do this is the safest way to extract the secretion from the frog and for you, because if you're trying to hold it in your hand and stimulate this frog and it starts emitting a secretion, it's getting all over your hands, all over your clothes, the frog is trying to squirm out of your hands. And it makes the process a lot more complex than what it has to be. So they stretch it out, and what they'll do is they'll stimulate the frog. They'll either massage the foot, or they may get some grass and tickle the nose, and you'll kind of see the frog start doing this, basically trying to piss it off a little bit. Then the back will start to turn white, right? And then we'll take a stick, and we'll wipe it from the hind legs, over and under, on the back, on the belly, and then we release it. We never take from the front legs or from the front of the frog. We always leave enough Kambo on the frog to protect itself in the wild. And it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to completely regenerate its full supply of Kambo. And the thing is, where they go in the jungle, like where the Kokama live in the Mazan district of Iquitos, are outside of about 3 hours up the river from Iquitos, we have access to over 100,000 frogs. And they will go to a different place in the jungle each time so that they never overharvest or stress the same frog more than once. What else was I going to say about that?
Are they, do they now have like frog farms or, or is it just, I mean, how have they, it's just, they're natural. I mean, I've been to the jungle and my God, all you hear are frogs like all day, all night.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's the interesting thing is it's left in its natural habitat in nature. So the frogs usually build their nest above pools of water. This is where they exist. And basically we'll go out into the jungle, right? We'll find a body of water in the jungle, and then we'll start calling for it. And the sound kind of goes rap, 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 rap. Right? And we'll make this sound into the jungle, and then we'll listen, and then we'll hear it call back. We'll send a boy up to get it, right? Bring it down. We'll go through the whole harvesting process. Takes right about 3 minutes. And then even when they grab the frog never feels threatened. It's never trying to jump away or run away or anything like that. We'll take it. We'll put it into a branch close to where we took it from, and it goes about its life.
Wow. And by the way, I will say, as someone who's been to the jungle many times, all of you, anyone who's harvesting, including especially climbing the tree, is also really risking themselves, because as my the person I work with in the jungle says, everything is poisonous. It's kind of like this. Everything's kind of like scary out there. Freaking tarantulas and big snakes and animals that you've never seen before in your life.
Will pull you into the jungle. Like it's a wild
you end up with like scratches everywhere. I mean, it's a wild place. I mean, it's the most beautiful place I've ever been in my life. I'm so grateful to have spent time there, and hope to go back soon. But there is a certain aspect of like, well, they're putting their life at risk. They're, this is here. I mean, it's always really interesting to me to think like, I mean, I don't even know the history. I'm sure you know, but they say like tobacco is the medicine that tells us how to even find this. Do you know, like, what's the lore of Kambo? Is it like, how many years ago did they discover this? And was it usually through another plant, right? That says
ayahuasca, actually.
Oh, was it ayahuasca? Okay.
That's the legend. I think it was a Huni Quinn about 2,000 years ago. The legend goes that a village became very sick, and the Pahe or medicine man whose name actually happened to be Kampu, went to, Mother Ayahuasca to try to find a cure, and she presented him a frog and instructed him how to use it. And then he found the frog, used the frog, healed this village, and from that it was known as Kambo or Kampu. Yeah.
Wow. Mm.
The thing is too, one thing I want to mention is a lot of times people will, like accuse us of cultural appropriation, appropriating modality from, but what they don't understand is, especially where these people live at in the jungle, and industrialization is creeping up on them, right? And a lot of these communities are being forced out of their villages because the logging trucks are coming in, some of the oil companies are coming in, and they're being pushed into Iquitos and some of these cities, right? That is and losing their complete way of life. And Kambo gives them a bit of economy again, right? Because we are using Kambo more and more here in the West. It provides them a living. It gives them an economy so that they can stay on their land and they're not having to leave their whole way of life going into these cities trying to provide a living for their family. So it is a symbiotic relationship.
Yes, and I actually have talked about that a lot here on this podcast because, of course, I mean, I'm accused here and there, right? All of us. But at the same time, I say, as someone who's spent time down with these communities, people forget they are not really living off the land. They buy things at stores just like all of us. I mean, gasoline for their scooters, for their motorboats down the river,
cooking oil, sugar.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like there's a lot of this like indigenous living off the land, and I'm like, I have yet to see that anywhere, by the way. I know it exists somewhere in this world, but most of them are integrated, even these tiny little towns on the river that I've been to in the middle of nowhere, there's a store. There's one gas station, they still need to buy certain things. So
they'll fish and then they'll go trade fish at the market so that they can buy sugar and oil, like there's still an economy that they have to exist in.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that. So Jason, what's next for you guys at Tribal Detox? When do you have your next training? Like what's coming up and anything new and interesting expanding for you guys?
Yeah, so we do 4 trainings a year. We go January, June, August, and October. So we're about to finish up our last training of the year next week. And then I have a couple instructors down in Austin, one down in Miami that does courses also, teaches the Tribal Detox curriculum. But right now we're doing more of a push with Grunt Style, really getting into the veteran community and helping out there. And we may be doing integration events like that ourselves. And just really pushing into these communities that are struggling with suicide, struggling with drugs, psych meds, things like that. But for the most part, we're just doing what we do. We do our 4 trainings a year. We serve in between, and that's our happy place. Wow.
Well, I'm so glad that you came on. I know it was a bit. It's you and I both. I'm like, at least we're on the same page. You don't say yes to a lot of interviews. I don't say yes to a lot of training programs or even Kambo practitioners. So, wow, this has been very informative, and I'm so glad that you're doing this work with Grunt Style. This gives me so much hope, and I think it's really important that everybody hears what's going on, and to really be doing the good work for the healing of humanity. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Beth, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to your audience.
Thank you so much, and we'll have all your links right here in the show notes if anyone wants to check it out or head to a training, or even the advanced Kambo practitioner training that my friend and former client Sarah Price helped develop. So we'll have all those links right here in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here, Jason. Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're feeling inspired, I'd appreciate it if you showed your love with a review. And check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of this podcast. You can also head to BethAWeinstein.com to learn more about me and grab my free business growth trainings. Remember, you carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times.